It's a pretty crappy day out here, folks. It's about 34, raining. Might get some sleet here in a little bit, possibly some snow. We don't know yet, but you can take a look behind me. There's a big old curtain of crap coming my direction. So behind me, we have this Komatsu PC240 that is having some issues with the bucket cylinder on it, and I'll show you what's going on with it right quick. So this thing surprisingly only has like 2,800, about 2,900 hours on it. But anyways, the customer tells me that you can curl the bucket in, which I'm doing right now, and that works relatively normally, except if you shock load it, it kind of drifts down, which is kind of evident a little bit. Can't really tell much, but he says when you curl it out, it curls itself back in. So let's see if it does it. I'm just barely giving any juice on the lever. Yep, there it goes. And I'm curling out right now. And what happens if you got something like that going on, the oil in the cylinder, just simple physics, in these hydraulic cylinders, you've got what's called the barrel. This is what I call it. You got the barrel of the cylinder, and then you've got the chrome rod of the cylinder. And in the middle of this, attached to the end of the rod, is just a round piece of metal that's got seals in it that holds your pressure up and down on the rod. This is what's called the rod end, up like on the rod end of the piston, obviously, and then your barrel end. So whenever you put pressure in the cylinder, your oil acts on that piston, and it's going to push your piston out, which is connected to the rod, so it's going to push your rod out. And when you send oil to the other end, same thing, it's going to push it back this way. Whenever you have either a bad seal, or in this case probably a broken rod, which is what I'm betting, I don't know yet, still got to pull it, but whenever you've got oil getting past your seals in any kind of way, it's going to act on the barrel end of the piston with more force, because you have more surface area on this whole piston right here versus on the other side on the rod end, where you have that rod taking up some of the surface area on the piston. So if you have 5,000 psi pushing this way and 5,000 this way, you have the whole surface area right here. So this end is always going to overpower the rod end. Even if you're getting oil from the rod end of the barrel, it's going to go past the seals and then push right back on that piston and rod the cylinder out, regardless of whether you're extending or retracting the cylinder. So I'm going to set this thing on the ground, unpin it, and see if the rod falls out right quick. If it doesn't, then I'll probably take the cylinder off and take it back to the shop, pull it apart, and see what the seals look like. While I'm at it, the customer also said, hey, the hammer's hitting a little slower than what I'm used to on machines this size. Can you take a look at that too? Sure, buddy, I can do it. Let's go in here to this button, and let's go over here to working mode, and we're going to go to breaker setting. And mind you, this machine has a factory wet kit, so it has attachment setting and breaker setting. If you're running a rock breaker, be dang sure you're running this thing in breaker mode, because if you run it in attachment mode and you press this foot pedal the wrong direction, which this guy doesn't have the dang foot pedal pinned for breaker mode. Hopefully he didn't backflow this hammer. But anyways, on these Komatsus, they have this neato little locking tab right here that you can use to lock the pedal from going backwards. So it allows it to go forward, but not backwards. And this thing is loose too, so I need to tighten that up, because that pin doesn't do anything if that's loose. Anyways, so make sure that you have it in breaker mode and not attachment mode on these Komatsus, because backflowing a hammer will absolutely ruin your hammer. People may be saying, oh man, I've done it before and it didn't cause any problems. Well, dude, if you run it like that, it might do something if you run it backwards, but it isn't going to run for very long. But anyway, breaker setting, 210 liters per minute. Let me freaking go over here and change it to standard, because NPK gives you flow specs and standard. We're going to go to defaults, units. Let's go to imperial, back. I don't know why we can't just use the metric system in the United States, because it's so much easier. Let's go back here to attachment settings. breaker settings, and you may or may not be able to change this in your unit, but you can on this one. So it's maxed out at 55 gallons per minute, and I want to say a GH12's flow capacity is like 45 to 58 GPM, so this thing should be handling this hammer pretty well. So I'm not going to mess with that. I am going to change the name in it to GH. Anyway, I don't want you to listen to all this beep, so I'm going to change this name to GH12, and then I'll jump back on here. So I changed the name in the monitor to GH12 for the GH12 hammer, so somebody doesn't, you know, just for ease of use, whatever. But it's set at 55 GPM. This hammer is rated for 45 to 58 GPM of flow, so we're right on the money with being at the top end of the flow allowance for this hammer. And I'm gonna try to run this hammer right quick and see what he's talking about with it being too slow. I can't do that with one hand, unfortunately, so I'm gonna put the phone down and try to test this hammer with this bucket cylinder being all loosey-goosey and floppy, and see what this guy's talking about with it being slow. With the oil flow being set correctly, given if the monitor's right, if the machine's actually putting out 55 gallons of flow and it's slow, it could be an issue in the hammer with nitrogen charge. So if the hammer is indeed slow, then I'm going to get my nitrogen charge kit out and check charging this hammer. But one thing at a time here. Let's see if it actually works and runs correctly first. So it's a little bit difficult to run this hammer with one hand, but since I can't get the hammer to curl out where it's perpendicular with the ground, I can't use it on flat ground. So they're chipping into this face right here and kind of knocking material off. So I'm just gonna push the tool into the face right there where there's some rock. I'm gonna hit the trigger. Let's curl the arm in a little bit to preload it, and running pretty good to me. That's what it sounds like. That's doing pretty dang good. So I'm gonna go ahead and call the hammer part of it good. I don't see any problems there. I'm gonna spin this old thing around and take it over here. Sorry if I seem lethargic with these controls, because running an excavator with one hand is pretty difficult. Let's go this way since I don't know what's over there. Oh yeah, that bucket's way far away. So I'm gonna go stick this thing on the ground and pull the cylinder off, and hopefully the rod falls out on the ground when I unpin it, so I don't have to take the cylinder apart to see if the barrel is messed up. Well, I got it set on the ground over here. Let me wipe this windshield off right quick. I got it set on the ground. The hammer's working correctly, so I'm gonna back my truck over here and try to get this cylinder off without getting soaking wet. It looks like the rain has stopped for now, but hopefully when I unpin it, the rod just slides out the end and I can just order a rod and a seal kit for it, because I really don't feel like taking this cylinder apart out here in the rain. But it is what it is. If the rod doesn't come flying out, I'm just gonna pull the cylinder off and take it to the shop and take it apart inside the shop, just because that's easier than trying to do it out here in the rain and keeping stuff covered up and all that. So I'm gonna get going on that. Ooh, would you look at that? They left me a free grease gun with a lock and lube on it. Just kidding. Don't be a piece of crap. Leave stuff alone where you found it. Yeah, I just got my truck turned around. I look out over the horizon. God dang, dude. That's one heck of a, air quotes, deer stand. Golly, it's like the freaking Taj Mahal of deer stands. Focus, you think? Jeez. Of course, it's right as soon as I'm about to get out, it starts raining. Wouldn't have it any other way. I'll tell you what, it's a pretty crappy day to be a field mechanic. Rain, 35 degrees. I know people are probably gonna be like, oh yeah, I work in -10 up here in Canada. But you know what, this is about as bad as we see it in Texas, so whatever, sue me. But you can't argue with a view like that, man. And this deer stand, ooh, that deer stand over there, more like the Hilton. But anyway, back to this old unit. So if you couldn't tell, the rod's broke just right off there. That's what you get when you curl the hammer in at wide open speed and slam it. So don't do that. And luckily it didn't turn the piston sideways in the barrel or anything like that I can tell, but it broke off cleanly, so the piston may still be good. So I'm going to take the gland off the end, pull it out, and probably put some air pressure into the barrel, and hopefully I don't launch that thing off the end of that hill. But I'm going to try to get the piston out and see if it's tore up at all or if the barrel's tore up. If it is, I'll be ordering a reman cylinder. If it's not, then I'll just be ordering a rod and a seal kit, and I'll throw this thing back together. So let's get that thing off of there. You may call me a weenie for wearing these rubber gloves, but it sure is nice whenever the water coming out of the atmosphere is basically freezing and everything you touch is cold, so this at least keeps your hands dry. So again, sue me if you don't like the fact that I'm wearing gloves. So I'm gonna get a chisel and try to separate this. Man, it might be stretched already. There's a little bit of a crack, but whenever stuff like this happens, whenever like the piston has whacked the end of the gland really hard, I always replace the bolts, because I've had it happen before on a 200 size excavator where it stretched the bolt right here and I didn't catch it. And well, I don't know if I didn't catch it or if they just did the same thing again, but the bolts actually all ended up breaking off after I resealed the cylinder. So be sure to just order new bolts, be safe, torque them to spec, that way you don't stretch them. If you go in here and tighten them with a 3/4 inch gun or whatever, there's a chance of stretching those bolts and weakening them. So order new bolts, torque them to spec, Loctite them, whatever you want to do. I'm gonna get this gland out and take a peek inside. Well, that was easy. Dropped it. I caught it. Well, I've already got everything pretty much picked up because it's starting to rain on me pretty hard, so I got to get out of here. But after further inspection on the inside of the barrel, there's a couple of little light scratch marks over there, but I don't know if this issue caused it. I don't see anything over here on the top or bottom, but that's nothing that I can catch a fingernail on, so I'm not going to worry about that. I can't even feel it with my bare hand. So the barrel is good. I've already got this stuff loaded up because it's raining. The head gland's good. I'm gonna have to put a new bushing in there, obviously, but the main dilemma I'm at right here, let me get down away from that noisy compressor. The main issue is getting this rod out of the piston, and if you can see right here, this is the factory set screw hole. So this tells me that this rod has been replaced once before, just because you can't drill a hole where there's already a hole. So when you replace a rod, you got to drill another hole, tap it for a set screw, and that's not even a 12mm factory set screw. So somebody didn't put the right size of set screw back in here. But none of the seal dividers are damaged or anything like that. These wear rings are looking worn. That's their job, but they're looking a little bit worn. So I don't know if the last person that had the cylinder apart even put those wear rings in there, because it doesn't come in a standard seal kit. So anyway, I'm gonna take this thing back to the shop and see if I can get this rod out of this piston. I'll check back with you after that point. Well, I'm gonna clean up and get the heck out of here, because that is a curtain of rain that I really don't want to sit through. Well, I finally got my new rod in the mail. I went ahead and ordered a brand spanking new piston for this thing too, I didn't feel right having 3 holes in it, and the rental department approved the repair. This thing's only 800 bucks, so went ahead and got a new rod in the mail and a new piston in the mail. So I got cleaned the Cosmoline off of here. I don't have any seals or anything in this piston yet, just because I'm only going to drill the hole right now, but I couldn't reseal or install new seals anyway because my parts department decided that they want to leave my seal kit off of my parts order with all this other stuff on it. I mean, I literally ordered a whole box full of stuff and they decided to omit the seal kit for the cylinder. You know, makes sense. You know, you don't need a seal kit if you're rebuilding a cylinder. But anyway, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to thread this piston all the way down until it stops. I'm going to stick 2 bolts in the end of this piston and snug it down a little bit with my pry bar. I'm not going to get it insanely tight. And then what you do with these Komatsu cylinders is this isn't a high torquing piston. So the way that they keep them from unthreading off the end of the rod is they put a threaded set screw drilled in the threads right here. So you drill right in the middle of the inner thread and the outer thread, and then tap it, run a 12 millimeter by 1.75 set screw in there, and that's how you keep this piston on. I'm gonna get my drill out and drill me a hole right quick after I center punch that. And whenever you're drilling the holes, I always start with like a I don't know, a 1/4 inch drill bit, and then I'll go straight up to a 1/2 inch drill bit, just because stepping it up on this hard chrome, like hardened rod, they tend to break the corners of the bit off if you try to step it up incrementally, like a 1/16 at a time. So I usually drill a hole with a small bit and then go directly to the larger bit size, just so to try to avoid breaking the bit off. So I'm gonna get my drill out, center punch this, and drill me a hole. Well, as you can see, I got everything drilled and tapped in there. That was kind of a bear because, sorry, I was holding my tools, cleaning it up. But as you can see, I mean, you got to split that thread right here and right there. And when you're running your tap around in there, each flute of the tap wants to catch right there on that edge whenever you're tapping the hole out. And I don't have a metric drill bit set, nor do I have a drill index to get the hole absolutely correct. So I had to run a 3/8 bit in there and then ream it out some with my burr bit. So it was kind of crappy starting my tap, but you got to make do with what you got. I'm out here picking up where I left off on the cylinder rebuild job, replacing the rod. I apologize for the noise. I've got a heater and my welder going, the power set heater. So I've got my gland sitting right there, my seal kit warming up in front of the heater. Got a new bushing over there, my wear rings, greasers, freaking bolts and stuff. And last week I got a new rod, unboxed it, and then I went ahead and threaded this piston on there, drilled and tapped the hole for the set screw. I didn't ping it because I'm gonna have to pull the set screw out and install some seals on the inside of the gland. I'm about to snag this rod, take the piston off, install the seals on the piston, wear rings, etc., etc. And then I'm gonna reseal the gland over there and then throw this whole honky together. I'll tell you what, I sure am impressed by this new system Komatsu is using on these seal kits. The way they used to operate is they would just give you that one part number for the seal kit, and you had to match them up wherever they came out. So you had to keep really good track of it, and especially if you haven't done it before, you almost have to take photos. But since I've done this before, I know how they all go, I know where they all go. But Komatsu did this cool thing where they wrap all these seals with this little adhesive tag, cool little Komatsu logo, and they put the part number on there for you. So there's no question as to where the seals go in the gland. So that goes in the gland. Where's the other one? That's the dust seal. There's the backup and pressure seal for the gland. So if I hadn't any clue, if I'd have come up to this thing and somebody else had torn it down, that would really help me out. So props to Komatsu on that one. So guys, I want to give you a little pro tip. Whenever you're repacking a cylinder or doing anything really, you always want to have lubrication. Lubrication makes everything more fun. I think we can all agree with that. But I'm going to take some of this Lubripay assembly lube. It's normally used for putting together engines. And I'm just going to gobbledygook it inside these seals, because whenever these bare rubber seals get on this rod, it is insanely hard to push the gland on there. So I'm going to lubricate these seals so I can push that gland on there. And another pro tip, whenever you're putting the dust seal on here, it may be tempting to go ahead and drive it into this gland with it sitting here flat on the bench, but over my time as a mechanic, I have struggled and struggled trying to get that gland started on these rods. With these smaller cylinders, it doesn't really affect you that much, but as you get bigger cylinders, like, I don't know, in my case, 360s, 490s, PC 800s, and 650s and whatnot, bigger machines, those glands can weigh 40, 50, 60, 100 or more pounds. So if you put the dust seal on the rod with the snap ring, don't forget your snap ring, you can just slide your gland onto the rod, no problem, and then get you a very dull punch or a very dull chisel and just drive it around the perimeter of that thing and drive it right into its counterbore in this rod gland. So you don't have to fight with getting this lip over this very, very inadequate chamfer on this rod. I'll show you how to do that right quick. I'm going to try my hardest to show you what I was talking about with installing this lip seal before you put the gland on. So this thing isn't that heavy, it only weighs like 20 pounds, but you're going to want to be careful not to cut the seal on any of these jagged surfaces in here. So I'm just going to lift it, slide it right on the rod right there, and it's actually going to index, and then you just got to wiggle it and push it on there. And if you installed the dust seal into the gland, you'd be having a fight with this inner lip getting over this very, very terribly inadequate chamfer. I don't know why they even put it there, but anyway, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a dull punch, because you don't want to tear up the seal. I'm going to get a dull chisel, and just, you know, go around the diameter of this seal and just slowly work it into this gland. I'll probably wait until after I get the piston on, just so I'm not pushing that thing back off the rod. And then after you get that thing seated, I'm just gonna, you know, this snap ring isn't very strong, so I'm just gonna squeeze it shut, stick it in there, and then I'm gonna take that same dull chisel and tap on that snap ring to make sure that snap ring expands and holds that seal in there. If you don't tap that thing with the chisel, I've seen that snap ring just come out and it's sitting on the end of the rod, and then eventually this dust seal, it'll work itself out, and then once that dust seal is gone, there's nothing to protect the oil seals from getting torn up by dirt and grit and whatever else it is. Oh look, dude, it's snowing. Wow. So on to the next task. I turned my heater off because I'm just freaking tired of listening to it, tired of listening to my welder. But this is your pressure packing right here that goes right in the middle of your piston, and as you can see, I've put the set screw in and then I peened it. Let's see, I peened it 4 times. This part broke off, so I peened it further down in the threads. And whenever you may go, oh man, you're not gonna be able to get that out. Yeah, just get you a carbide bit or a regular drill bit if you don't have a carbide, and just eat those little nipples off of there, and you can yank that thing right out of there. I always replace the set screws in these anyway, so even if the thread does get messed up, it's not a big deal. And then whenever I'm repacking these, if I'm not replacing the rod, I always run my tap in and out of that hole after I get the set screw out, just to make sure the threads are good. So I'm going to put this pressure packing on, and it helps if it's cold outside. Turn on your defroster on your dashboard, go set this thing on it. This thing's actually warm to the touch. As you can see, I've got the rod installed in the barrel, got the gland on. I'm going to go ahead and get this bushing pulled in here. I went ahead and started it with the hammer after I cleaned the cosmoline out of this board. I installed the grease fitting, so I'm going to get my all thread out, get my porta power ready, and pull this bushing into this bore. And when you're pulling these bushings in on the cylinder eye, you want to keep in mind that there is a dust seal that goes inside here that's around about, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch thick on each side. So don't just push it and stop, and then also be mindful not to push it too far, because it's always a pain in the ass to have to flip your setup around and push it back the other way. So I have a separate video on how to do pins and bushings on these. The method I use is I'll get a 1-inch drive socket that fits basically the outer diameter of this, or a little smaller, and then I'll make a mark, a sharpening mark on the socket, so as I'm pushing it in, I can just stop at that sharpening mark instead of having to push it a little bit, you know, retract my cylinder, look at it, push it a little bit, retract it. You know, it just goes way faster if you can just mark what you're pushing it in with, and then stop it where your mark is, take everything off, and then put your seals in on both sides. So I'm gonna rig up my bushing pulling rig and push this bushing in. I don't know if you can see these little flurries, but it's snowing and the sun's out. So I don't know what to think about this. I got the bushing pressed in there and knocked a couple threads off my stinking all thread, so that sucks. But that's why that's a consumable item. But anyway, got the bushing pushed in, got the seals installed, and I'm about to get my torque wrench out and torque the head gland bolts down to whatever the book spec is, and I'm gonna go hang it on the machine, which is somewhere out in this mess. See, I got that cylinder put back together on this old girl, pinned it on there, cycled it, put a couple gallons of oil in the hydraulic tank, got it parked back over here on the ready line. That's a job done. If you couldn't already tell, we did move this machine from the job site back here to the yard because it was going to take a couple days for parts to show up for this thing. So, and instead of letting it sit on the job site for a couple days burning the customer's money since he's paying for the rental, we've just sent another unit out there. It came back to the yard, and once the parts showed up, I went ahead and put this machine back together, got it parked on the ready line, and it's ready to rent another day. So as always, thank you for watching the Shade Tree Certified YouTube channel. I'd greatly appreciate it if you like, subscribe, share this video, and turn on your post notifications for this thing. Help me grow the channel. Hope y'all get some good use out of this content, and I'll see you guys on the next one. This is Shade Tree Certified.